The ballroom was glowing with golden lights, the air thick with perfume and the smell of expensive wine. My mom was in her element, diamond earrings, silk dress, all eyes on her as she stood in front of a towering cake. She tapped her glass with a spoon, smiling sweetly at the crowd. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice smooth and charming. 60 years is a long time, and I've been blessed with so much." People clapped politely. She glanced at me, and I braced myself. "But of course," she said, "life isn't perfect. My oldest daughter, well, bless her heart, she's still figuring things out." There was a ripple of polite laughter. I felt my chest tighten. "She's been through a divorce," Mom continued, her tone dripping with pity. "Still hasn't given me any grandkids. Works at, what is it again? That little office job." She waved her hand like she couldn't remember. I could feel the blood rising to my face. A few people chuckled awkwardly, glancing at me and then looking away. I caught sight of my ex-husband across the room. He was leaning back in his chair, sipping champagne, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. My stomach flipped. Mom wasn't done. "But I have hope," she said with fake sweetness. "Maybe one day she'll do something worth being proud of." More laughter, this time louder. It felt like every pair of eyes in the room was on me, scanning, judging. My sister, standing off to the side, shifted uncomfortably but didn't say a word. My hands were gripping my wine glass, so hard I thought it might crack. I looked at my ex again. He raised his eyebrows at me and mouthed sorry. But his eyes were cold. Why was he even here? We hadn't spoken in years, not since the divorce where he walked away with more than his share, thanks in part to my mom's helpful advice to him back then. The applause at the end of her speech felt like a slap. People started mingling again, pretending they hadn't just watched me get torn down like that. I slipped toward the balcony for air, my heart pounding. The laughter from inside followed me like smoke. I didn't know why my mom had done it in such a public way, but deep down, it wasn't surprising. She'd always been better at playing to an audience than being a mother. What stung more was seeing my ex there, smirking like the whole thing was a show for his entertainment. Standing there in the cool night air, I made myself a promise. If she wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone she knew, she'd learn that I wasn't the kind of daughter who stayed quiet forever. And I had no idea that before the night was over, both she and my ex would regret ever underestimating. The clinking of glasses had barely stopped before my mom found me again in the crowd. She didn't need a microphone this time. Her voice carried well enough. I was standing near the dessert table, pretending to be busy with a plate of fruit, when she called out my name. "There she is," she said brightly. "My eldest daughter. You all know her." She slipped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me forward like a trophy. She's still working on finding her path in life. I gave a small, stiff smile, but my mom wasn't finished. "Now, my youngest. Oh, you should see her. She's a doctor. 2 beautiful children. A husband who adores her." She beamed at my sister, who stood a few feet away, cheeks pink with embarrassment. My mom turned back to me, still smiling for the crowd. "And then there's my firstborn, still trying to figure it all out." There was a small ripple of laughter. Not the loud kind from before, but the kind people give when they aren't sure if something is meant as a joke. My grip tightened on the plate. I could feel the heat rising in my face again. "Of course I'm still waiting," she added. "One day, she'll do something worth being proud of." "Right." She gave my arm a squeeze, as though this was all in good fun. I could feel eyes on me. My old classmates. My mom's friends from the golf club. Even distant cousins I barely knew. I wanted to disappear. Across the room, my ex was leaning in his chair, one elbow propped on the table, champagne glass in hand. He was trying to hide his smile behind the rim of the glass, but his eyes gave him away. They glittered like this was all part of some private joke. My mom moved on, talking about her plans for a trip to Italy next spring, but the damage was done. Every word she'd spoken sat heavy in the air around me. The comparison to my sister wasn't new. Mom had been doing it since we were kids, but tonight it felt sharper, crueler, like she wanted the whole room to see me as less. I set my plate down on the table, fruit untouched. My sister caught my eye for a brief second and gave a small shake of her head, as if to say, "Just let it go." She meant well, but she didn't understand. The laughter still seemed to echo in my ear. My ex lowered his glass and leaned toward the man sitting next to him, saying something that made them both smirk. I felt my jaw clench. I tried to move to a quieter corner, but people kept brushing past me, smiling politely, their eyes darting away just a little too fast. The kind of smiles people give when they've just heard something embarrassing about you, but don't want to admit it. I found myself near the coat check, away from the main crowd. I could still hear my mom's voice carrying through the room, cheerful and confident, as though she hadn't just cut me down in front of everyone. I stayed there for a moment, staring at the floor, willing my face to cool. I didn't want to go back inside, but I knew hiding wouldn't make this stop. The way my ex had looked at me, the way my mom had delivered those lines, It didn't feel random. It felt planned. And if it was planned, I needed to know why. So I straightened my dress, took a deep breath, and stepped back into the glow of the party, ready to watch and listen more closely. Something was going on, and I was going to find out what it was. I stayed near the edge of the party, trying to avoid my mom. My hands were shaking a little, and every time I looked across the room, I saw my ex sitting there like he belonged. It made my skin crawl. He was laughing with a group of people I didn't even think he knew, leaning back in his chair like this was his celebration. My sister walked past with a plate of appetizers, and I caught her arm. "Why is he here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She glanced over her shoulder toward him. "Mom invited him," she said quickly, like she wanted to drop the subject. "Why?" I pressed. She hesitated, shifting her plate from one hand to the other. "Because," she said, "he's practically family." Her tone was casual, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. The words made my stomach twist. Practically family. That's how Mom had always treated him, like he was the son she wished she had instead of the daughter she got. When we were married, she'd go out of her way to praise him in front of me. When things started falling apart between us, she'd told me to stop overreacting and appreciate what I had. Even during the divorce, she had a strange way of talking to him. Not the way you'd expect a mother to speak to the man who broke her daughter's heart. She'd send him birthday gifts, invite him to family barbecues even after the papers were signed. I'd chalked it up to her being stubborn and unable to let go, but seeing him here tonight, smiling like this was his stage, made me wonder if there was more to it. I let go of my sister's arm and stepped back. She gave me a small, tight smile, like she wanted to comfort me but didn't know how. Then she drifted away into the crowd, leaving me standing there with my thoughts. I glanced toward the table where he sat. He caught my eye and gave me a slow nod, like we were old friends sharing a moment. It was the same expression he used to wear when he'd win an argument at home, a little smug, a little knowing. My jaw tightened. I didn't want to spend the night obsessing over him, but it was hard to ignore. The way my mom kept glancing at him, the way he seemed so at ease here, the way no one else seemed surprised to see him. It was as if I was the only one who found it strange. A server passed by with a tray of champagne, and I grabbed a glass, mostly just to have something to hold. I sipped it slowly, trying to look like I belonged, trying to ignore the tight knot forming in my chest. But my eyes kept drifting back to him. It wasn't just his presence. It was the way the whole room seemed to make space for him. People leaned in when he spoke. My mom laughed louder when he was near. Even relatives who barely talked to me were greeting him with hugs. Old suspicions I'd buried for years started to rise again, sharper this time. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was just my anger making me see connections that weren't there. But a small, nagging voice in the back of my head kept saying the same thing over and over. This wasn't an accident. He wasn't just here to be polite. There was a reason he'd shown up tonight, and I needed to figure out what it was. I was standing near the punch bowl, staring at the bubbles in my glass, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and saw my cousin, Jenna. She looked like she had something important to say, but her eyes kept darting around the room as if she didn't want anyone to notice us talking. "Come with me for a second," she said under her. She led me toward a quieter corner near the hallway that led to the restroom. The noise of the party faded just enough for her to lean in close. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "Earlier tonight, before you got here, I overheard your mom talking to someone." She paused, watching my reaction. She was bragging about how she helped your ex during the divorce, how she gave him advice so he could get a better deal. For a moment, I just stared at her. "What?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "I thought she was kidding," Jenna went on quickly. "You know how she says things to get a laugh? But the way she said it, it didn't sound like a joke. She was proud of it." A dull, cold feeling spread in my chest. I wanted to tell Jenna she must have misunderstood, but a part of me knew she hadn't. It made too much sense. The way my mom had always taken his side, the way she had brushed off my complaints when he started lying to me, the way she still treated him like family. Who was she talking to? I asked. "I'm not sure," Jenna said. "I didn't recognize them. Some guy in a dark suit." But she was smiling, like she'd done something clever. I almost laughed because I thought she was joking. But now, she trailed off and glanced toward the main room. Now I see him sitting over there like he owns the place, and I'm thinking maybe she meant it. I swallowed hard, the taste of champagne suddenly bitter in my mouth. Jenna was watching me carefully, like she was worried she'd said too much. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked quietly. "Because you deserve to know," she said simply. "If it's true, that's messed up." I nodded, but I didn't trust myself to speak. My mind was buzzing, going back over old conversations, little moments from the divorce that had never made sense. The way my ex had seemed so confident in negotiations. The way my mom had avoided looking me in the eye when I complained about the settlement. Jenna gave my arm a light squeeze. "I'm sorry," she said, and then she slipped back into the crowd, leaving me alone with the noise of laughter and clinking glasses spilling from the other room. I stayed in that hallway for a minute, staring at the carpet pattern, trying to steady my breathing. I could still hear my mom's laugh from across the room, bright and easy, as if she had nothing to hide. And maybe she thought she didn't. Maybe she thought I'd never find out. But now I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, bragging about helping him. My ex, the same man who'd taken so much from me. The same man who was here tonight, walking around like this was his party too. If Jenna was right, then this night wasn't just about celebrating my mom's birthday. Something else was going on, and my mom had made sure he was part of it. I noticed it when he first walked in, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Now, standing at the edge of the dance floor, I saw it again, my ex's briefcase. A slim, dark brown leather one that looked expensive. It was resting against the leg of his chair, his foot hooked loosely around the handle like he was guarding it. Most people had come with small purses or no bags at all. This was a birthday party, not a business meeting. But he kept that briefcase close, even when he got up to refill his drink. He would set it down beside him and keep a hand on it while talking to people. I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe he had just come straight from work. But the way he kept glancing at it made me think otherwise. It wasn't casual. It was like he didn't want anyone else near it. He was talking with a small group now, laughing easily, his other hand wrapped around a glass of champagne. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked down toward the bag. I moved a little closer, pretending to study the framed photos on a side table. I could catch bits of his voice, smooth, confident, the same tone he used to use when convincing someone to agree with him. One of the men in his group gestured toward the briefcase and said something I couldn't hear. My ex chuckled and shook his head. Later, he said. The man laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people give when they're curious and can't wait to see what's next. I stayed where I was, half hidden behind a tall plant. The longer I watched, the more it felt like he was waiting for the right moment to do something. This wasn't a man casually enjoying a party. This was someone holding on to something important. He shifted in his chair, leaning down to adjust the briefcase, as if making sure it was secure. I saw his fingers brush the combination lock. It clicked softly before he let go, his thumb resting on the handle for a second too long. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just papers from the office. I knew him well enough to recognize that protective body language. When we were married, he'd only act like that when carrying something valuable, or something he didn't want anyone else to see. I took a slow sip from my drink, watching as he got up again. This time, he picked up the briefcase and kept it in his grip while walking across the room. People stepped aside without him asking, their eyes following the bag just as much as they followed him. I trailed behind at a safe distance, weaving through groups of guests. I didn't want to get caught staring, but I also didn't want to lose track of him. If he was going to pull something, I wanted to see it happen. He stopped near the far corner of the room, away from most of the noise. My mom appeared from the other side, her face bright, her voice low. She glanced at the briefcase, then at him. I couldn't hear what they were saying from here, but I caught the way her smile tightened, almost like she was suppressing excitement. He tapped the side of the bag with his fingers and nodded. It was enough to make my pulse quicken. Whatever they were planning, it was connected to that briefcase. And if I wanted to know the truth, I needed to stay close. I kept myself close enough to watch without drawing attention. The music was playing softly now, and people had started gathering near the cake table, waiting for the candles to be lit. My mom stood at the center of it all, smiling at everyone, but her eyes kept shifting toward the far side of the table where my ex was standing. I moved along the edge of the crowd, pretending to look at the decorations. The closer I got, the easier it was to hear their voices. They weren't talking loud, but they weren't whispering so softly that it was impossible to catch. My mom leaned in slightly toward him. "She'll never see this coming," she said, her tone light but certain. I froze, my eyes fixed on the row of plates stacked at the end of the table. He gave a short laugh. "Don't worry," he said. "The paperwork's airtight." The word hit me hard. Paperwork. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a moment. My mind jumped to 100 possibilities, but none of them made sense. Paperwork for what? She smiled and gave him a small nod, as if they had just agreed on something important. He glanced toward the crowd, then back at her, keeping his voice low. I caught fragments, words like timing and smooth and final. Every one of them made my chest tighten a little more. Someone near me laughed loudly at a joke, and the sound jolted me back into motion. I reached for a fork from the stack, acting like I was just getting ready for cake. Inside, my thoughts were spinning. They were clearly in on something together. It wasn't just casual conversation. It had a weight to it, the kind that comes when people are sharing a secret. My mom's eyes were brighter than usual, and my ex had that confident, self-satisfied look he used to get when he thought he'd already won. They stepped back slightly when a guest approached them, breaking up the moment. My mom turned away to greet someone, her smile turning to the wide, practiced one she used for parties. My ex drifted toward the other side of the table, his briefcase still in hand. I forced myself to step away, blending back into the crowd so they wouldn't notice I'd been listening. The noise of the party filled my ears again, clinking glasses, quiet music, bits of conversation, but it all felt distant. Whatever this paperwork was, it was important enough for them to keep it between themselves. And the way she'd said I'd never see it coming made it clear I was at the center of whatever they were planning. I kept my eyes on them from across the room, my grip tightening on the fork I still held. Something was about to happen, and I needed to be ready when it did. The room grew quiet when my mom tapped her glass for attention. She stood at the center, glowing under the warm lights, thanking everyone for coming. People smiled, lifting their drinks as she spoke about friends, family, and the joy of 60 years. I stood near the back, pretending to sip my wine. I could see my ex a few feet away from her, that briefcase still in his hand. He wasn't smiling at her speech. He looked like he was waiting for his turn. When she finished, there was polite applause. Before anyone could start talking again, my ex stepped forward. His shoes clicked on the polished floor, his face calm and confident. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. Conversations stopped. Even the servers paused where they were. He set the briefcase on the cake table, clicking it open with deliberate care. "I have a gift for the woman of the hour," he said, glancing at my mom with a smile that looked rehearsed. "Something that's been years in the making." I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers bound neatly together. The sound of the metal clasp snapping shut echoed faintly as he set the case aside. He held the papers high enough for people to see. "This," he continued, "is the official transfer of the deed for a very special property, her family home. The home she built her life in. The home she deserves." A few people clapped lightly, confused. My heart started pounding in my ears. He looked down at the first page and began reading sections out loud, formal legal phrases. The words signed and witnessed and executed drifted across the room like a cold breeze. He spoke my name clearly, saying that I had agreed to transfer the property to my mom. My stomach dropped. I had never signed anything like that. I hadn't even discussed anything like that. As he read, my mom covered her mouth in a small show of emotion, though I could see the gleam in her eyes. People in the crowd murmured softly, smiling at what they thought was a touching moment. I barely heard the rest. My hands felt numb. Every word he read was a lie dressed up in legal formality, and the worst part was, no one else seemed to know it. When he finished, he turned to hand the papers to my mom. She accepted them with both hands, holding them close to her chest like a treasure. "I don't know what to say," she told the crowd, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "This means so much to me." People clapped again, louder this time. I stood frozen, staring at the papers in her hands. Somewhere deep inside, past the shock and confusion, something colder began to settle. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't an innocent mistake. Whatever was going on, they had planned it. I kept my face neutral, forcing my body not to move, not to react. But inside, the truth was becoming clear. Something had been taken from me, and they were bold enough to do it in front of everyone. The clapping was still going when I heard my sister's voice cut through it. She wasn't shouting, but her tone was clear enough for everyone to hear. "That's interesting, Mom," she said, stepping forward a little. "Because last week you called me asking how to spell your maiden name. You said it was for a signature you needed for tax stuff." The room went quiet fast. My mom froze, her hands still holding the papers, smile slipping just a little. A few people glanced between them. I could hear a couple of low whispers starting. My sister kept her eyes on our mom, her expression calm but sharp. "You told me it was nothing," she continued, "just some routine paperwork. But now I'm wondering if that's really true." Someone in the crowd let out a short laugh of disbelief. Across the room, I noticed a phone come up, the red light blinking as it started recording. Then another. Soon, at least 3 people had their phones out, pretending to be casual about it, but clearly catching everything. My mom's face tightened into the polite smile she used when she wanted to control the room. "Sweetheart," she said lightly, "this is hardly the time." "No, I think this is exactly the time," my sister interrupted. Her voice was still even, but each word was deliberate. "Because if my memory's right, you needed that maiden name for a signature. And now I'm looking at these papers." She let the sentence hang, eyes flicking toward the stack in my mom's hand. A ripple went through the crowd. It wasn't loud, but you could feel the shift, people leaning in, wanting to hear more. My mom glanced toward my ex, quick and nervous, like she wanted him to step in. He just stayed where he was, adjusting his cufflink as if this had nothing to do with him. I stood still, not saying a word. Every eye in the room was on my sister and my mom. The energy had changed. The admiration from a moment ago was replaced by something else, curiosity mixed with suspicion. My mom finally gave a small laugh, shaking her head. Honestly, I think you've misunderstood. But another voice from the crowd cut in softly. No, I don't think she has. It was one of our relatives, an older woman who rarely spoke up at gatherings. She was holding her phone steady, recording. From the corner of my eye, I saw people whispering to each other, hands covering their mouth. The buzz of conversation grew just enough to drown out the background music. My sister didn't look away from our mom. She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. The first crack in the perfect picture had appeared, and everyone could see it. Jenna, my cousin, stepped forward through the small crowd that had... She held out her hand toward my mom. Can I see that for a second? She asked. Her tone was polite, but there was no hesitation in it. My mom tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Why? Because I work at a law firm, Jenna said simply. I just want to check something. Reluctantly, my mom handed the stack of papers over. Jenna flipped through them quickly, stopping at the last page. She stared at it for a moment, then looked up, her eyebrows raised. This stamp is fake, she said, holding the page up so the nearest people could see. I know the notary who supposedly signed this. That's not their signature, and that's not the right stamp. The words landed hard. A few people gasped quietly. My mom opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, my sister spoke again. I think there's more, my sister said, pulling out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times, then started reading aloud. Mom, I'm taking back what's mine. Mom, can't wait to see the look on her face. Mom, this will show her her place. The room seemed to shrink around us. People were leaning in, phones still recording, eyes darting between my mom, my sister, and Jenna. My mom's face went pale. That's out of context, she said quickly, but her voice lacked the usual confidence. My sister kept her phone raised, scrolling. Out of context? You sent me these messages 3 days ago. I didn't even respond. And now here we are. I glanced toward my ex. His jaw was tight, and his hand was gripping the handle of his briefcase. He wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes moved toward the nearest exit like he was figuring out the fastest way out of the room. Whispers filled the space, louder this time. People were no longer pretending not to watch. A few guests exchanged knowing looks. One woman shook her head slowly. Jenna closed the papers and handed them back, but no one moved to take them. This isn't just a misunderstanding, she said quietly. If this is what it looks like, it's illegal. My mom took a step back, clutching the documents, but she didn't say anything else. My ex shifted his weight from one foot to the other, eyes flicking toward the door again. The air in the room felt heavy. Whatever control my mom had over the evening was gone. It wasn't her celebration anymore. It was a scene, and everyone was staying to see how it ended. Someone must have called them already, because it wasn't long before 2 uniformed officers walked into the room. The music had stopped by then, and most people were just standing around, waiting to see what would happen. The officers went straight toward my mom. One of them spoke to her quietly, showing her something on a small notepad. Her hands tightened on the papers she was holding. She tried to smile, but it looked forced, almost painful. Across the room, I caught sight of my ex moving toward the side door. His steps were quick but careful, like he didn't want to draw attention. The briefcase was still in his hand. I stepped forward and blocked his path. He froze, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I think I should be going, he said softly. I kept my voice low enough for him to think it was just between us, but loud enough for the people nearby to hear. That's fine. I already sent proof of your shady corporate deals to your competitors this morning. The look on his face changed instantly. His smirk dropped, and his jaw tightened. A couple of guests nearby turned their heads at my words, their expressions shifting with curiosity. He didn't say anything else. He just stepped around me and walked faster toward the exit. Back near the center of the room, my mom was still speaking with the officers. A few people were openly filming now, holding their phones high. Others stood in small groups, whispering behind their hands. The warm glow of the party was gone. The space felt smaller, colder. My mom's voice rose slightly, trying to regain control, but no one seemed convinced. She glanced toward the door where my ex had disappeared, then back at the officers. Her face looked tight, almost cornered. Guests started leaving in 2s and 3s, some avoiding her completely, others giving polite but distant goodbyes. As they passed me, I could hear bits of their conversations, quiet, sharp words about the papers, the fake stamp, and the texts my sister had read. The beautiful decorations, the tall cake, the perfectly set tables. It all looked wasted now, like the celebration had been emptied out. What was left wasn't a party, just a room full of people who had seen too much. I stood there for another minute, watching her try to hold herself together under the weight of all those eyes. For years, I had been the one left red-faced while she stayed composed. Not this time. When I finally turned to leave, I didn't rush. I walked slowly, past the clusters of whispering guests, past the people still holding their phone. The air outside felt cooler, lighter. For the first time in a long time, my head was high. She was the one left standing in the middle of a ruined evening, and I didn't have to say a word more. So, what do you think? Was I justified in exposing them and walking out, or should I have handled it differently? I'm honestly curious to hear your take. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more wild, true-life stories like this, make sure you follow along and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next one drops.